Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with a video that should have been my first in the Handyman's Guide to Finishing Your Own Basement. If I can flip or change her on YouTube, I will change the order, but I am at least going to change the name. This is going to officially be part one of the series. I'm not going to be talking about work I've done or showing work or anything like that, or even costs. Well, a little bit about costs. This is literally just going to be a planning video, right? And what this video essentially is hopefully going to be, it's going to hopefully help anyone out there to make a decision whether they want to try to finish their own basement or not, because there's a lot of factors that go into it, which we're going to be talking about, that are going to affect your decision one way or the other. Of course, as I go through the points of what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to use my own life experiences, situation, whatever, that will hopefully guide anybody through this. Now, granted, everyone's going to have slightly different life circumstances, but hopefully you can kind of listen to what I say and somewhat hopefully apply it to your situation as best you can. Now, if your situation is completely different than mine, well, at least you know why I decided what I decided and all that. So I hope this is helpful to some folks. So we're just going to go ahead and kind of get into this to decide, whether you should attempt to finish your own basement or not. Basically, the first thing that you want to consider before you decide to move forward with this or not, are you a good candidate for attempting to DIY all or some of your basement, right? So how do you figure out if you're a good candidate or not to possibly do this? Well, you have to think, how committed am I? I think that's kind of number one, right, is commitment. You have to be committed to basically doing the work, because if you're DIYing, no one is standing over your shoulder saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that, blah, blah, blah. It's all self-motivation, right? Okay, so if you are a person who struggles with being self-motivated and all that, taking on a project like this is not likely to turn you into a person who's going to be particularly self-motivated. Even myself, and I generally am fairly decent with self-motivation, despite appearances. If I decide that I want to do something, typically I do it, right? And it took me a year in between thinking about really wanting to do it versus actually doing it, because I just went through some of my old videos in March of 2021, so almost a year and a half ago, right? I put a video up, because my older daughter had moved out of the house, and I said, hey, I'm going to be finishing my basement soon. March of 2021. I did not get around to actually really starting the work until April of this year. So slightly more than a year it took me to go from this is something that I can do and I want to do to actually doing it. It took me literally a year, okay? A little more than a year. And that's okay, because sometimes you need to, since this again is very self-directed, you need to feel that the time is right, and you need to properly be motivated to do it for this to actually be productive. So finally, at that point, I just hit a point in my life and I said, okay, I'm doing it now. And it's been full speed ever since, full speed ahead, right? So there's all of that. Now, that being said, this project is taking up a very large chunk of my spare time, right? But this is, again, it's in my spare time. I still have to work my full-time job. I still do some things as a side business. Let's see, so I have family obligations, and honestly, sometimes I just want to enjoy my time off. I don't want to always be working no matter what when I'm not doing other things, right? So basically, I've had to find a way to more or less kind of make this work. I had to basically kind of force it to kind of stick into the rest of my life. And I've been able to find a way to make it work for me. Everyone's going to have a different mix of how much they want to work versus, the time they have, yada, yada. That's going to vary person to person, and you have to basically be at a place to where you know you could put effort into this consistently. Even if it's only once a week, once every 2 weeks, you don't have the time ticking. So, but you just need to be able to move forward at least at some kind of pace. You don't want to just, wait a year in between doing each step of your project. Otherwise, it will literally never get done. So you want to be able to work at least at somewhat of a decent pace to make forward progress to where you can actually see this thing being done. So that's the biggest part to decide whether you want to do this or not. Another good part, honestly, is how good are you at doing research, right? Because for myself, the reason I call it the not so handy man's guide to doing your basement is I'm not very handy naturally, right? Like I don't just intuitively know how to do this sort of work. It's not something I do every day. I'm naturally extremely intuitive with technology. Like I can look at technology, like computers, phones, TVs, audio equipment. That's my jam, right? Like that stuff, boom, I can look at it and I could probably fix most problems in an extremely short amount of time. Get it working, whatever. I'm very good with that sort of thing, like because that's my great interest, and it's what I do professionally. So I'm really good at working with that type of stuff. Now, construction work, not so much, right? And honestly, if I weren't building my basement, I would have zero natural interest in this stuff at all, right? I'm only doing the only reason I have any interest in this is because I am so motivated to finish my basement. I want it extremely badly. So that is enough to push me forward to do these things that are outside of my comfort zone and basically make it happen, right? And it has, and my research skills, again, that comes with being good with tech, right? I'm very good at finding things on the internet that I want to find. And there's a giant wealth of information on this topic on the internet. So I'm able to, find all the how-tos, all the YouTube videos, whatever, and I'm able to apply that knowledge to what I'm doing, right? Each step of the way. So that is, all that. So if you check those boxes, right, you'd probably be a good candidate for, you know, doing some of this work yourself, or maybe even all of it, just depending on your level of comfort, motivation, all that. So now that helps me segue kind of into my next point, right? Um, there's pros and cons of basically doing this, paying a contractor to do it all versus doing it all yourself, or some of the work, or whatever, right? So here are the pros of paying a contractor to do the work, right? The two biggest pros are it's a shitload easier on you because you're not doing the work, and it's also much faster, right? Because you get a group of contractors and they're gonna have a whole team of men usually working on your projects. It's usually not just one person. Most of the time you got a team working on your stuff. So they're going to be able to get it done a lot faster than you're going to be able to get it done yourself. One, because, well, it's their job, so they're not like fitting it in between other things, right? Whereas you are, so they're going to get to you much quicker probably than you're going to get to yourself. They're much more skilled at it than you're likely to be. Now, of course, there are exceptions. There are people who are incredibly skilled at this doing it themselves, but average, you're not going to be nearly as skilled as the guys doing the work that you're paying to do it. So for basically speed and ease, contractors are going to have it over doing it yourself every single time, right? So if you're a person that just wants to kind of, just throw some money at it and say go, and you're okay with that, and we're going to talk about cost here in a minute. That's going to be the way to go, right? Now, of course, the biggest downside to contractors is cost versus doing all or some of it yourself, right? Because for my basement, the work that I'm looking to do, if I were to pay contractors to do all of it, it would probably run $30,000 to $40,000, right? And that's no chump change, 30 to 40 grand. And now, Could I afford that? Truthfully, yes, I could. I could afford to spend that kind of money on that project if I wanted to, but that would basically, I would have to do something I really don't want to do to afford it. I would either A, have to completely wipe out mine and my wife's savings, or get some sort of home equity line or whatever that I really don't want, at a debt. So that's a so basically, the really high cost of hiring all of this work out is what's preventing me from, hiring all of the work out. I don't want to basically put myself in a financial situation that I would more than likely regret later. Because we're going to be that's going to be the subject of another video, not this one, but financially, whatever you do, you want to be responsible, right? Whatever you feel is responsible for you. Everyone's different. So that's why we're talking about this, right? So after you decide, assuming you've made it to this stage and you're saying, okay, I want to, well, it doesn't matter whether you're paying a contractor or doing it yourself. The very first thing you do is you plan first, right? And dream big with no regards to budget. Dream the biggest dream that you can dream, right? I want a bar. I want 2 bathrooms. I want just any gigantic dreams you have about the space. Dream as big as you can. And then you're going to have to do your research to figure out your cost, right? How much is my quote unquote total dream going to cost versus basically just get the cost first, right? And then you look at that number and you're like, wow, that's way too much. Look at your, whatever it is you have planned out and scale it down where you feel you can scale it down, right? Like, for example, for myself, originally when I decided that I wanted to get started doing this, I was originally going to have a sink and toilet put in. Yeah, pretty modest, right, requirement. But for me, when I heard what the cost would be, I decided against it because I got estimates from 4 or 5 different plumbers. And on the low end, it was $600. On the high end, it was like $4,000. I sure didn't want to, hire the guy for 600 because plumbing was something I knew I couldn't do myself. There was no way I was going to attempt that myself. And that's another part of planning. Know your limitations, right? Know what you're comfortable doing on your own versus when you might want to call in help. And I knew that the plumbing stuff, I was like, no, I don't even want to try this. So again, I got prices, and that is quite a price difference between the high end and the low end. I didn't want to spend close to the minimum and have substandard work done, have some sort of problems with sewer gases or whatever escaping back up through I just didn't want to have any issues. So there was that. And then, of course, I didn't want to spend $4,000 to have a sink and toilet because that's way too much for that. Now, if they said they would do the entire bathroom for $4,000, including drywalling, doing everything, I would have highly considered it. But for just the sink and toilet, way too much money, right? So that's basically where, so that was a budgeting decision that I made pretty quickly and easily. I just deep sixed it, right? So so I got my idea in mind, I scaled it down to essentially what I want and what I can afford. And, and then after you decide, you may decide when you do this budgeting that you went too low. Like, I could afford more. Probably not going to happen nearly as much as scaling down, but scale up if you think you can or if you need to. Go for it. Can't hurt. Or you may hit it just right. It really is just going to depend on you. All this is going to be very dependent. And now, after you know exactly what you're going to be doing, you're going to want to break down the process, right, into each step. First, prep work, right, which is clearing the base, which is actually the part that I've already uploaded about this, right? You're going to want to do prep work, then framing, blah, blah, blah. Now, how you're going to break this down into each part, the internet is going to be your best friend on this, right? The internet is going to allow you to figure out logically what is each step in the process. Because keep in mind, when I started this, I knew nothing. Well, okay. I knew extremely little about this process, right? Of finishing your basement. I knew almost nothing, right? My knowledge level is now, I would say, moderate to high moderate, right? It's decent. I'm definitely good enough to plan and break it down and all that kind of stuff, right? This is stuff I had zero knowledge of before, but because of the internet and my ability to do research, I'm learning, right? So that's pretty much it. And then basically, you know, and the final thing that I want to say is, even if you decide to DIY some of it, you don't have to DIY all of it. That's the kind of the one thing that I really that's really good about this is basically you are in complete control over this process, right? You can decide to hire all of it out, hire none of it out, or just certain parts, right? And that, I think, it's going to be up to you and your individual comfort level / expenses / whatever. Everyone's going to have their own mix of what they want to do, right? No, people aren't the same, and everyone's going to have their own kind of, thing they're comfortable with. As for myself, the prep work I did entirely by myself because I knew I could. It wasn't beyond my abilities. Framing, I'm going to get my father-in-law to help me with that. I am going to pay him. We haven't decided on a price yet, but we'll come to an understanding of some sort. So I'm going to pay my father-in-law to help me frame, because I probably could do it myself, but it looks to be, a lot more complicated than doing pre-work, the pre-work was. Plus, he has actual experience framing. Like, he's done it. I haven't. So having him help me is going to be invaluable, right? So he's going to help me with that. The electrical work, which comes after framing, I'm going to pay a friend of mine to help me with that, right? And then just some of the other labor here, and then, but I'm going to be doing some of the labor as well. I'm not just going to pay them to do all of the work, and all of the rest of the steps, I'll either do it myself or I will hire people I know, or, if it comes down to it, I'll contract it out. The point is, it's completely up to me. And it's all very doable and achievable, right? And then basically, if you've made it this far and you've decided you want to move forward on this, my only other piece of advice on this is just get started. Just do it, right? Because if you just sit there and you think about it, you're just going to be like, I'd like to do it. But if you never actually start doing it, it'll never happen. And one thing I can tell you is, once you get started, the momentum to want to finish, again, assuming how badly you want to do this, right? If you've made it to the point where you're like planning it and talking, it's gonna mentally reinforce, and you're gonna want to do it, right? And then once you decide that you really want to do it, just start, because man, once you start, the momentum will carry you through, right? It's gonna get you to the end of that project eventually. So anyway, that is pretty much it. I hope. Oh, wait, cost. I forgot to talk about cost. Yes, I talked about what it would cost for a general contractor. I'm going to tell you about what I'm comfortable spending. And I mentioned this in the other part of the video. I'm trying to keep my total cost around $10,000. That's roughly what I'm shooting for this. So, because I said it would cost 30 to 40 grand with the contractors. Me doing it myself, plus with, some help from friends and family, I'm hoping around 10. If it goes as high as 15, it's not the end of the world, right? But I'm hoping to keep it much closer to that 10,000 mark than that 15, but whatever. That's pretty much it. Again, everyone's going to be comfortable with whatever things. And of course, with inflation and prices fluctuating, this video might be completely out of date in a year or two. Who the hell knows? So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, live long and prosper. Keep on rocking. I will see you guys really soon.